should not be listened to here, because the alarmists are those pessimists who figure out that Americans aren't smart enough to innovate our way out of this pickle, and we are in a pickle. And Senator, thank you for telling me about your book. I'm going to suggest a book you might want to look at. It's called Apollo's Fire. Book I co-authored, and it tells you how we're going to grow our economy, an economy that the evidence shows we can grow. Now, the American people are against this Dirty Air Act, and that's what it is, and I'll explain why in a minute. They are against this Dirty Air Act 3-1, and the reason is they know that the Clean Air Act reduced pollution 60% over the last 40 years, while we grew our economy 207%.
I agree.
Americans get it that we can innovate our way out of this pickle. Now, this is why this is a Dirty Air Act. I hear my friends saying, we don't have anything against the Clean Air Act. We're not gutting the Clean Air Act. It's like saying they're not against the Anti-Terrorism Act. All we're doing is passing a bill saying the FBI can't enforce it. Now, when you gut the EPA's ability to enforce the law, you turn the Environmental Protection Agency into the environmentally pathetic agency, and that's not what Americans want. They want something rather than dirty air. And this Dirty Air Act hurts kids with asthma, it hurts seniors with respiratory problems, and it hurts our economy. Now, I want to suggest to you there's a fundamental problem here. And that problem is that we are not listening to the scientists. And I'm going to ask you a question when I'm done here for a minute, and I hope I'll give you time to answer. But the scientists are telling us that we've got a real health problem in our hands. We got a letter from 1,800 scientifically trained medical professionals yesterday. It says communities across the nation will suffer, not maybe, will suffer from still suffer from poor air quality. Low-income families face the impacts of toxic air pollution every day, from smog causing asthma attacks to toxic mercury harming children's neurological development. Far too many people face a constant threat from the air they breathe and the impacts of climate change. Now, that letter is signed by, among others, doctors, Dr. Guillermo Arnand of Tahlequah, Oklahoma, Dr. Therese Kwan of Kingston, Oklahoma, Dr. Warren Teal of Sarnia, Oklahoma. Doctors across this country and scientists across this planet know that our health is adversely affected by these chemicals. And by the way, carbon dioxide is in the EPA, in the Clean Air Act. It's in Section 103. If folks want to look at it, carbon dioxide is in the Clean Air Act. And yet you are trying to take away the ability of Uncle Sam to protect our kids from asthma. And I got a problem with that. I'm going to ask you this question because I think it's fundamental to our disagreement. I respect your opinion and right to have an opinion. But the National Science Foundation, these doctors, the IPCC, depending on science from the U.S. Navy, from Nobel Prize winners, none of whom are going to be called by this committee, by the way, and I think it's too bad we don't have a real scientist up here. All of these people say that these things are bad for our kids' health. And yet this committee, their first witness, caused somebody, rather than listening to Nobel Prize winners, thinks somehow that he's smarter than the 2,500 scientists that are telling us this is a problem. Now, I want to ask you this question. If you've got, I think, grandkids, and I trust that if your grandkids were having a health problem, if they couldn't breathe, if asthma is affecting them, that you wouldn't take them to a lobbyist for the fossil fuel industry, you would take them to a pediatrician. You would take them to a scientist. So the question I ask you is, shouldn't we listen to the scientists here rather than the politicians? And shouldn't we trust people of science that have an overwhelming conclusion about this issue? And I'll yield to you for an answer.
Thank you very much. And that's essentially the same question that Mr. Waxman had, so I'll respond to it. Yeah, in the very beginning, when people were listening just to the IPCC, as I said in my opening statement, that's been pretty much debunked. Now, I don't know how anyone with a straight face is going to say that that should be the leading science. But when you mention scientists, yes, many of them are saying this. If you go to my website, I've given 5 speeches on the science, very long ones, I might add. We started out with some 50 scientists, went up to 100 and up to several hundred. And so there are many scientists that have varying views. That's why I say the science on this issue is mixed. The economics are not mixed. the last thing I want to mention that, because somehow it's got to be in this record, and this is responding to Mr. Waxman, the court did not mandate that the EPA regulate CO2. And this is the words of the court. Under the Act's clear terms, the EPA can avoid promulgating regulations if it determines that greenhouse gases do not contribute to climate change, or if it provides some reasonable explanation as to why it cannot exercise. Well, what they're saying is they had three choices: either regulate it, don't regulate it, or do nothing. And that was not a mandate from the courts. And I believe that has to be in here at some point. Go to my website, you'll see the science.
Thank you. I might say that we did invite a scientist to testify. Mr. Chu was invited, and he declined our offer. And now, Senator Inhofe,